I couldn't get to heaven any other way. I'm not strong enough. I don't have the capacity to do it on my own. And Jesus is constantly and always has been extending his merciful love to me. My name is Scott Roth. I'm 28 years old. I got confirmed in the Catholic Church 2 Easters ago. Earlier on in my life, I had a conversion to Christianity, where I finally decided to trust in Jesus as my Savior. But to give you just a little background on kind of my life and how I got to where I am today, my mom was raised Catholic. As a child, she went to Catholic Mass. My grandmother is a full-blooded Italian. When she was a kid, she went to Mass regularly. And my mother, as a child, went to Mass as well. My dad, however, was born in a family that was not Catholic. His grandfather was a Baptist minister. And when my mom and my dad met, they actually kind of couldn't really agree on which church to go to. But I was raised basically in a home that was Christian, but not specifically Catholic, not specifically Protestant. We went to a Presbyterian church. It was common for my parents to drop us off, and me and my brother would get picked up by them at the end of the service. So I didn't have a real strong Christian upbringing. But there was talk of God, and if you would have asked me, I would have said that I was a Christian. As I got into high school, and particularly when I got to college, my faith did not have a central role in my life. It was not a big focus, and I kind of went the way of the world, so to speak. There's just a lot of in college, there's a lot of partying, there's a lot of drinking. I was on the track team up there, and the culture up there was to go to these parties and to live that way. So my faith gradually kind of got pushed aside. And to be honest, my faith wasn't really all that solidified at that point in my life. I didn't understand its purpose or understand the relevance of it so much at that time. But soon I started to realize that the promises of the world and these parties and that sort of a lifestyle was rather empty. There wasn't a whole lot there. And so I would say that it was mainly out of need that I came to Jesus, because I got to a point in my life where I was actually very depressed. I had a girlfriend at the time who I had basically poured my heart and soul into. And then she broke up with me. And so my whole world shattered at that time. And it was at the same time that my parents were actually going through a divorce themselves. And so the whole question of, is there a love out there that is eternal? And questions about the nature of love and whether or not people can actually love each other faithfully came into question because of my own experience with my girlfriend at the time and my parents splitting up. So I was actually very, very devastated by my parents' separation. And I know that God had a hand in these two events happening, because I think at that time in my life, I needed to get to a low point like that in order to turn to God, to trust in Him with my life. And it was at that point that I invited Jesus into my life, and I decided to follow Him. And things got a lot better really quickly. I attended a church up in Seattle called Mars Hill Church, and it is a Protestant church, but that was the place where I really learned a lot about Christ, and I really, in fact, gave my entire life to Christ. It was up there that I did that. So I'm very thankful for that church, and I was immediately called to service. I became a Bible study leader. I started greeting people in the church on Sundays, and so I was put in a leadership role right away, and it really helped me to come into relationship with Christ and with Jesus. So at this particular time in my life, I was experiencing a great deal of anxiety, and I knew that Jesus had promised me peace. So I was wondering, why am I not experiencing this? What needs to happen? So I sought help from a counselor. This counselor that I was in contact with had described to me that the Eucharist itself was the sacrament of the Catholic Church that brought him the most healing and the most peace. It was when he started to experience the greatest change in his life. And so naturally, I wanted that in my life as well. And I realized that indeed was something that was missing from my current tradition, the Protestant tradition that I was in. And so he described the Eucharist as a physical union with God, like a literal physical union with God, which I knew was, if it were true, was an incredibly, incredibly powerful thing that I was not yet part of. Because in my tradition, we would receive communion and it was nothing but a symbol. And we were asked to remember Christ's sacrifice, and that was it. Just remember it, appreciate it. But he told me that at the Catholic Mass, the bread and the wine become the literal body and blood of Christ, and that we consume it, and then God is dwelling in us physically. I chose to accept them because I believe that the Catholic Church is the church that Christ founded, and furthermore, I believe that the bread and the wine truly do become the body and blood of Christ, and that much of my healing that I've experienced in my life, in fact, probably all of it, is due, and I give full credit to Christ through the Eucharist for my healing, because the anxieties that I was experiencing did start to go away. And Jesus certainly saved me through these sacraments. I knew that I wanted to be married, and as a Protestant, I had the hardest time understanding marriage and being able to see marriage in the way that God sees it. The Gospels say that those who have pure hearts will be able to see God. And I knew that something in my heart was not pure. And I believe that it was this society that has caused me to view marriage in a way that I shouldn't have. The culture is constantly giving us messages about our bodies, about our sexuality, and the messages they're not true. And so what we do is we carry around this shame of our bodies, we carry around shame of our sexuality, and I carried that baggage into the way that I viewed marriage. God and sexuality, or God and marriage, seemed like two irreconcilable things at the time. And I would say that probably one of the biggest reasons I became Catholic was because of Pope John Paul II, who's now Saint John Paul II's Theology of the Body. It's a teaching about our bodies. It's a teaching about human sexuality, and he portrays it in such a way that makes it a very glorious and very honorable thing to be married and to have children, to have a wife. And so as soon as I started to see the glory behind God's design in marriage, and that in fact man with his spouse better represents God than man alone, when that dawned on me, it suddenly made sense as to why I should pursue marriage. I knew I wanted it. I had considered other vocations as well, religious life and priesthood, but I knew deep down that I wanted to be married, but I couldn't quite understand how it could be a glorious thing. God is a communion of persons. God is an exchange of love, and that he created marriage to reflect that. It all started to make sense, and I soon met my future wife, the wonderful, beautiful woman that I'm married to now. I would not be married to her if it weren't for the Catholic Church and if it weren't for Jesus. And my life is so much better now than it was before, thanks to Jesus and thanks to the sacraments of the church. Truly has absolutely saved me and changed my life forever. The Catholic Church has something called sacraments. There's 7 of them. The church that I attended did not have sacraments. What is it that's powerful about the sacraments? They're a visible and tangible form of an invisible grace. I know that definition is close to the real definition. So what are some examples? I spoke earlier about the Mass, the Eucharist. The Eucharist is the sacrament that I receive the most frequently. My wife and I, we attend daily Mass where we receive Christ bodily every morning, actually. So we start our day that way. And I think what's particularly powerful about that is that in other traditions of Christianity, your relationship with Christ is up in here, mainly. And what's different now about my relationship with Christ is that I actually have a physical union with Christ. I consume Christ every morning, and I know that he is physically dwelling within me because I've just consumed him. I think what is particularly powerful about this sacrament is that heaven will be union with God. If we have union with God here on earth, we can have heaven on earth in a sense. Not completely, but the fact that I can have union with Christ here on earth at the Mass is about as close to heaven as I can get here on earth. One of the other sacraments that's really powerful, but is often avoided or overlooked is the sacrament of confession or reconciliation. It is God, in fact, who is the only one who can forgive us. But sometimes it's hard to believe that we're truly forgiven if we, in the confines of our room, just we and God, pray and ask for forgiveness. Sometimes it's hard for it to really sink in and for it to really that forgiveness to manifest itself in our lives. What reconciliation is for is a very, very tangible way to experience the forgiveness in a much more real way. I'll say this, I'm more afraid sometimes, I'm more afraid to confess my sins, at least the really grievous sins, to a priest than I am to just go in my room and confess it to God. And that's the easy way. To go in my room and confess it to God and kind of do it that way it's sort of a way that is easier and it's a lot less tangible, but the consequence is that there's a lot less grace available there. So the experience of going to a priest has a greater power to transform my faith in God's mercy than it would if I just went into my room and did it my own way. Jesus is my Savior because I couldn't get to heaven any other way. I'm not strong enough. I don't have the capacity to do it on my own. And Jesus is constantly and always has been extending his merciful love to me as long as I can remember. And he still will, and he will always for the rest of my life until I get to heaven.